The scorching Manila sun punished the cracked asphalt of Divisoria, one of the poorest neighborhoods in the Filipino capital. Among the makeshift stalls and the penetrating smell of accumulated garbage, an 8-year-old boy walked barefoot through the busy streets. His torn and dirty clothes barely covered his skeletal body, where every rib could be counted through his dried skin. His large, dark eyes carried a deep sadness that contrasted with his young age, reflecting a cruel reality that no child should ever know. Junrei, as he was known by local residents, had lost his parents in a traffic accident 2 years earlier. Since then, he had lived on the streets, depending on the kindness of strangers to get at least one meal a day. His routine consisted of waking up before dawn, when street movement was still minimal, and walking miles in search of food or a few coins that could guarantee his survival. Hunger was a constant companion, a painful emptiness that had become part of his daily existence. The deafening noise of colorful jeepneys and motorcycles created a chaotic symphony that echoed through the narrow alleys. Street vendors shouted their products, while the aroma of street food mixed with a strong odor of urban pollution. For Junrei, these smells of fried foods and spices were constant torture, reminding him of his persistent hunger. He watched people pass by hurriedly, each absorbed in their own problems, rarely noticing the small, frail figure extending his hand seeking help. On that particular day, the heat seemed more intense than usual. The thermometer read over 95 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, and Junrei felt his head spinning due to dehydration and lack of food. He had gone 2 full days without eating anything substantial, only a few sips of dirty water he had managed to find. His trembling legs could barely support him, but he knew he had to keep moving, because stopping meant giving up, and giving up was not an option for someone fighting daily for survival. Despair was beginning to take hold of his childish heart when he decided to position himself near one of the busiest restaurants in the area. There, he observed entire families enjoying hearty meals, children his age laughing and playing while their parents conversed carelessly. The difference between their worlds was stark and painful. Junrei leaned against the rough wall of the establishment, closed his tired eyes, and made a silent prayer, asking only for an opportunity, for a gesture of kindness that could relieve his suffering, even if just for one day. Mornings always brought the same cruel routine for Junrei. He would wake up on the cold floor of a dark alley, using old newspapers as blankets and a cardboard box as a pillow. His small body ached everywhere, the result of poorly slept nights on the hard concrete of Manila's streets. The first sensation that dominated him upon awakening was always intense hunger, a piercing pain in his stomach that seemed to consume his strength from the very first moment of consciousness. He would get up slowly, checking if his few possessions, a cracked plastic bottle and a dirty piece of cloth, were still beside him. The boy had developed a survival strategy over the months living on the streets. He knew the exact times when restaurants discarded leftover food, knew which jeepney drivers were more generous with a few coins, and could identify the police officers who treated him kindly from those who expelled him from commercial areas. His natural intelligence, sharpened by necessity, allowed him to navigate the complex social network of the streets with a wisdom that impressed even the adults living in the same situation. During the hottest afternoons, when the sun made it impossible to remain on the asphalt, Junrei sought refuge under the awnings of commercial establishments. There, he observed the constant movement of people, studying their faces and behaviors, trying to identify those who might have compassion for his situation. He had learned that pitying looks didn't always translate into help, but he had also discovered that some of the simplest people, those who seemed to have little, were often the most generous. This life lesson, learned early, shaped his way of seeing the world and the people around him. Loneliness was perhaps the most devastating aspect of his condition. Although he was always surrounded by crowds on Manila's busy streets, Junrei felt deeply isolated. He yearned for simple conversations, for a genuine smile, for any form of human connection that went beyond simple charity. Sometimes, he would watch other children playing with their parents and feel a pain in his chest that was different from physical hunger. It was emotional hunger, the emptiness left by the absence of family love and care. This need made him value even more any gesture of kindness, no matter how small. As the day progressed and night approached, Junri's anxiety increased proportionally. Manila's streets became more dangerous after nightfall, and a boy alone was particularly vulnerable. He needed to find a safe place to spend the night, preferably near some establishment that remained open 24 hours, where the lighting could offer some protection. On that specific night, as he walked slowly through the streets looking for a place to sleep, Junrei didn't imagine that his life was about to take a completely different direction. Destiny was preparing an encounter that would change not only his own existence, but would touch the hearts of millions of people around the world. It was a particularly difficult afternoon when Junrei positioned himself near one of the busiest intersections in Makati, Manila's financial district. The place was filled with well-dressed executives, curious tourists, and hurried workers, all absorbed in their daily routines. The contrast was stark. While people dressed in expensive clothes passed by talking on cell phones about business and social commitments, the malnourished boy remained almost invisible, as if he were just another element of the urban landscape. His attempts to get attention were ignored by most, who looked away or quickened their pace when they saw him. It was at that moment that a medium-height man, wearing simple clothes and a cap that partially hid his face, stopped in front of Junrei. Unlike the other people who passed by hurriedly, this man had something special in his eyes, an intensity and kindness that immediately caught the boy's attention. His clothes revealed no wealth, a simple t-shirt, cotton shorts, and sneakers worn from use. To any casual observer, he looked like just another ordinary Filipino, perhaps a worker returning home after a tiring day. There was nothing in his appearance that suggested he was someone special or important. The man crouched down to Junri's eye level, a gesture that immediately set his approach apart from all other interactions the boy had experienced. Most people who occasionally gave him alms did so quickly and distantly, avoiding direct eye contact. This stranger, however, looked directly into his eyes, and Junrei could feel a genuine connection in that gaze. There was a deep understanding there, as if the man could see beyond the dirt and rags, recognizing the human being that existed behind the difficult circumstances. The expression on the man's face gradually changed as he observed Junri's physical condition. His features, initially calm, contracted into a mixture of compassion and silent indignation. It was evident that he was deeply touched by the boy's situation, and this genuine emotional reaction didn't go unnoticed by Junrei. Throughout his months living on the streets, the boy had developed a keen ability to distinguish between superficial pity and true compassion. This man clearly felt something deep, an empathy that transcended the casual encounter between strangers on the street. Without saying a word, the man extended his hand and gently touched Junri's thin shoulder. The gesture was simple, but loaded with meaning. It was the first affectionate touch the boy had received in months, and he felt a wave of emotion rise in his throat. Tears began to form in his tired eyes, not from sadness, but from an inexplicable gratitude for that moment of human connection. The man then made a gesture indicating that Junrei should accompany him, and something deep in the boy's heart told him he could trust this kind stranger. Without hesitation, he stood up and began walking beside the mysterious man, not knowing he was about to live an experience that would mark his life forever. The mysterious man led Junrei for a few blocks until they reached a small local restaurant, a simple establishment that served traditional Filipino food. The aroma of adobo, pancit, and freshly cooked rice filled the hungry boy's nostrils, making his stomach churn with anticipation. It was a place frequented mainly by local workers and middle-class families, far from the sophisticated restaurants in the central area. The choice of location revealed something about the man's character. He wasn't trying to impress or draw attention, but rather provide a nutritious and authentic meal in a welcoming environment. Inside the restaurant, the man completely ignored the curious looks from other customers, who clearly found the presence of a street child in the establishment strange. Some whispered among themselves, discreetly pointing at Junrei and his shabby appearance. The man, noticing the boy's discomfort with the unwanted attention, chose a table in the most secluded corner of the restaurant, offering more privacy for both of them. His protective attitude was evident. He genuinely cared about Junrei's emotional well-being, not just his physical hunger. This attention to detail demonstrated a sensitivity that went far beyond a simple act of charity. Without consulting Junrei about preferences, knowing that a malnourished child would eat anything, the man ordered a generous variety of dishes. He requested white rice, chicken adobo, pancit canton, fresh lumpia, and even halo for dessert. The amount of food ordered was enough to feed a small family, but he wanted to ensure that Junrei could eat until he was completely satisfied, perhaps for the first time in a long while. When the food arrived at the table, the boy's eyes widened at the abundance. His hands trembled with emotion as he picked up the first spoonfuls of rice, and he had to control himself not to devour the food with desperate anxiety. Throughout the meal, the man watched Junrei carefully, making sure he was eating slowly so as not to get sick. Occasionally, he served more rice on the boy's plate or pushed other dishes in his direction, silently encouraging him to eat more. There was infinite patience in his gestures, an understanding that this moment was about much more than just satisfying hunger. It was about dignity, care, and recognition of Junrei's humanity. The man didn't ask invasive questions about how the boy had come to that situation, nor did he offer advice or judgments. He was simply present, offering his company and full attention. After Junrei finished eating, probably the best meal of his life, the man still hadn't finished his gestures of kindness. He got up from the table and went to the restaurant counter, where he spoke discreetly with the owner. Although Junrei couldn't hear the conversation, he could observe that the man was handing money to the establishment owner, much more than the cost of the meal. The restaurant owner seemed surprised by the generosity, nodding repeatedly in gratitude. When the man returned to the table, he explained through simple gestures that he had arranged for Junrei to return to the restaurant in the coming days and receive free meals. The kindness of this stranger seemed to have no limits, and the boy began to wonder who this special person was who had crossed his path. In the following days, the mysterious man began appearing regularly in the places where Junrei usually stayed. Always dressed simply and discreetly, he brought small gifts, a new pair of flip-flops, a clean t-shirt, a water bottle, or simply his company during a few minutes of silent conversation. What impressed Junrei most was the consistency of these encounters. The man always kept his implicit promises, appearing at the agreed times and places through gestures. For a child who had learned not to trust adults' promises, this reliability was revolutionary. The man seemed genuinely interested in Junrei's life, asking simple questions about his day, his fears, and his dreams. Through communication that mixed words in Tagalog, gestures, and facial expressions, they began to develop their own language of mutual understanding. Junrei discovered that he could share his deepest thoughts with this kind stranger, talking about the longing he felt for his parents, his nightmares about being alone forever, and even his small dreams of one day being able to attend school like other children. The man listened to every word with total attention, never interrupting or minimizing the boy's feelings. During one of their conversations, the man asked about Junrei's talents and interests. The boy, initially shy, revealed that he had always liked sports, especially watching boxing matches on television in local bars. His eyes lit up when he spoke about how he admired the determination and strength of the fighters, how they never gave up even when they were getting beaten badly. The man smiled peculiarly when he heard this, a smile that carried some secret knowledge, but he only encouraged Junrei to continue talking about his boxing heroes and how he dreamed of being strong like them one day. The transformation in Junrei was visible day by day. His posture had become more upright, his eyes had recovered part of their lost brightness, and he began to smile more frequently. The regular nutrition provided by the restaurant meals was helping his body recover, but even more important was the recovery of his self-esteem and hope. He began to see himself not just as a worthless street boy, but as a person worthy of care and attention. The mysterious man had achieved something that goes beyond common charity. He had restored humanity and dignity to a child who had lost them in the cruelties of urban life. What Junrei didn't know was that his encounters with the kind man were not going unnoticed by other people. Some local residents began to notice the pattern, commenting among themselves about the well-dressed stranger who always appeared to care for the street boy. Occasional photographers and people with cell phones began to discreetly capture images of these encounters, intrigued by the unusual dynamic between the two. Although none of them yet knew the man's true identity, there was something in his presence and gestures that suggested he was not an ordinary person. The way he moved, his natural confidence, and the respect he unconsciously inspired in people around him indicated that he was someone accustomed to being in prominent positions, even when trying to remain anonymous. The day of the great revelation came completely unexpectedly. Junrei was sitting in his usual spot, near the restaurant where he now had his daily meals, when he noticed an unusual movement on the street. Several people began to gather, pointing and whispering excitedly, while looking toward a group of men approaching. Cell phone cameras were raised, and the crowd's murmur grew with each second. Junrei couldn't understand what was causing such commotion, but he could feel the electric energy in the air, as if something extraordinary was happening. That's when he saw his mysterious friend walking toward him. But this time the situation was completely different. The man was no longer wearing simple clothes. He wore an elegant shirt and was accompanied by several people who clearly worked for him. Even more impressive was the reaction of the people around. They recognized him, shouted his name, and tried to get closer to take photos. The man Junrei knew as a common and humble citizen was, in fact, someone famous, someone all these people knew and admired. The boy was confused and a little scared by all the commotion, not understanding how his kind friend could be at the center of so much attention. Junrei's confusion intensified when he began to hear people shouting a specific name. Manny! Manny PACQUIAO! The name was familiar. He had heard it in conversations in bars where he watched boxing matches, but he had never connected that it was the same person who had been caring for him in recent weeks. Gradually, reality began to form in his childish mind. The kind man who had fed him, clothed him, and treated him with so much affection was Manny PACQUIAO, the legendary Filipino boxing champion, one of the most famous and respected men in the entire country. The discovery was so impactful that Junrei felt his legs weaken and had to lean against the wall to avoid falling. Manny approached Junrei with the same warm smile as always, completely ignoring the crowd surrounding him. He crouched down to the boy's eye level, exactly as he did every day, and placed his hand on Junrei's shoulder reassuringly. At that moment, despite all the commotion around them, it was as if only the two of them existed in the world. Manny gently explained that he had decided to make their friendship public because he wanted to help him more completely, and that for this he needed other people's help. He assured the frightened boy that nothing would change between them, that he would continue to be the same kind friend as always, regardless of his fame or fortune. The crowd around watched in respectful silence as Manny talked with Junrei. Many people were visibly moved, some even crying as they witnessed that scene of pure kindness and humanity. Reporters began arriving at the scene, and soon the story of the world boxing champion who had spent weeks anonymously caring for a street boy spread through social media like wildfire. Photographs and videos of previous encounters, which had been discreetly captured by curious onlookers, began to circulate, showing Manny in his most genuine and human form. The world was about to discover a facet of the champion that went far beyond his achievements in the ring. His infinite capacity for love and compassion for the less fortunate. The revelation of Manny Pacquiao's identity triggered a series of events that would completely transform Junrei's life. Within hours, the story of the malnourished boy and the kind champion spread across all social media, reaching millions of people around the world. charitable organizations, families interested in adoption, private schools, and even international celebrities began reaching out, offering help and support. What had started as a simple gesture of kindness from one person to another had transformed into a global movement of compassion and solidarity. Manny, true to his character, didn't allow all the media attention to harm his personal relationship with Junrei. He immediately provided a safe and comfortable home for the boy, hired specialized caregivers to help with his physical and emotional recovery, and ensured he received the best medical care available. Most importantly, Manny continued visiting Junrei regularly, maintaining the personal connection they had developed. He understood that behind all the publicity and opportunities that arose, there was a child who needed stability, love, and individual attention. Junrei's education became an immediate priority. Manny enrolled the boy in one of Manila's best private schools, but not before hiring specialized tutors to help him prepare academically. Years living on the streets had left significant gaps in his formal education, but his natural intelligence and determination, strengthened by survival experience, proved advantageous in the learning process. Teachers were impressed by his ability to absorb knowledge and his genuine gratitude for every opportunity to learn something new. Junrei's physical transformation was remarkable. With adequate nutrition, regular medical care, and a safe environment to sleep in, his body began to recover quickly. He gained weight healthily, his skin recovered its natural color, and his eyes regained the brightness typical of a child his age. But the most impressive transformation was emotional. Junrei had rediscovered his ability to dream, to plan for the future, and to believe in himself. He frequently expressed his desire to one day be able to help other children in situations similar to what he had experienced. The story of Junrei and Manny became an international symbol of hope and human kindness. Documentaries were produced, books were written, and their story was told in schools around the world as an example of how small acts of kindness can have transformative impacts. Manny established a foundation in Junrei's name, dedicated specifically to helping street children in the Philippines, and invited Junrei himself to actively participate in the projects as he grew and developed. The boy who had once been invisible on Manila's streets now had a voice that echoed worldwide, inspiring others to act with compassion and generosity. Months after the encounter that changed their lives, Junrei and Manny found themselves on a stage before thousands of people at an international charity event. The boy, now wearing an impeccable school uniform and with eyes shining with confidence, held the champion's hand while telling his story to a global audience. His voice, once weak due to malnutrition, now sounded clear and strong as he described how a simple act of kindness had completely transformed his existence. The audience was visibly moved, many crying openly as they heard the powerful testimony of the boy who had overcome impossible circumstances. The foundation established by Manny in honor of Junrei had become one of the most effective charitable organizations in the Philippines. In just a few months, they had managed to get hundreds of children off the streets, providing not only shelter and food, but also education, medical care, and most importantly, hope for the future. Junrei had become the foundation's young ambassador, using his own experience to identify and connect with other children in vulnerable situations. His unique ability to understand the mentality and needs of these children made him an invaluable intermediary in rescue and rehabilitation work. The story's impact transcended the Philippines' borders. Governments in other countries began implementing public policies inspired by the Foundation's model, and international human rights organizations cited the case as an example of how individual intervention can catalyze significant social changes. World celebrities began visiting Manila specifically to meet Junrei and Manny, many establishing partnerships to expand the reach of charitable work. The story had become a global cultural phenomenon, demonstrating that genuine kindness still had the power to unite people beyond cultural, economic, and geographical barriers. Junrei, now 9 years old, had developed extraordinary emotional maturity for his age. He spoke fluently about social responsibility, compassion, and the importance of giving back to the community. His teachers reported that he was not only an excellent student academically, but also a natural leader among his peers, always willing to help those facing difficulties. He had chosen to learn English with special dedication because he wanted to be able to tell his story to people around the world, spreading the message that every child deserves love, care, and opportunities. The friendship between Junrei and Manny continued to be the heart of the entire story. Regardless of their busy schedules, they maintained a weekly ritual of having lunch together, often returning to the same simple restaurant where they had their first shared meal. During these encounters, they didn't discuss foundations or public events. They simply talked like a mentor and his young protege, sharing stories, dreams, and reflections about life. Manny often said that Junrei had taught him as much as he had taught the boy, reminding him of the importance of staying connected to his roots and to the people who need help most. Both their stories had become a modern legend, proving that when fame and fortune are used with purpose and compassion, they can literally move mountains and transform lives in ways that echo through generations. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.